This podcast may contain explicit language. Welcome to the Greatest Movie of All Time podcast, the show that uses a unique grading style to redefine what the greatest movies are. I'm Tom Duncan.
And I'm Dana Duncan.
We also welcome our returning celebrity guest, an Instagram and Letterboxd film commentator, making his second appearance on the show to date. It's Joe Boukhari.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Glad to have you back. It's been 10 months, I believe, since you were first on for us with Forrest Gump.
That is correct. I got to revisit that gem and get my latest opinions on it. So
what have you been up to since that time?
Well, work's been good, family's been good, and on the movie side, just continuing for whatever reason to continue to watch 500 movies or seasons of TV every year. We're already past 150 for this calendar year so far and making surprising headway, but it doesn't feel like I'm trying to get to the goal anymore. It's just what I'm consuming at this point.
That's a very lofty goal, certainly.
It tends to take up the time. I don't know, some people
especially if you're making one season of TV the equivalent of a movie.
Yes.
I mean, that's if you had done episodes, I could maybe understand it a little bit more, but there are some long ass seasons of TV.
Yes, I'm very particular in what I'm choosing to watch. I can do the weekly drops; those are great, but I am not going back and watching, the 20-something seasons of SVU or anything like that. We're not plugging in 25 episode seasons out here.
Yeah, no Family Guy, no Simpsons, where there's like 30 episodes. Okay. Yeah, that would take a while, even at the half an hour mark. I think most of those are, but even so.
Yep.
All right, excellent. So if we are ready, let's plug into tonight's movie. We are revisiting Caddyshack, which originally we discussed on April 7th of 2021. So the day that we're recording this is about a week after that, 4 years later. It's been a long, long time since we did this original movie. But with that being said, tonight for our 258th episode, we revisit Caddyshack from 1980, written and directed by Harold Ramis with Brian Doyle Murray and Douglas Kenney, music by Johnny Mandel, cinematography by Stephen Larner, starring Chevy Chase as Ty Webb, Rodney Dangerfield as Al Zervik, Ted Knight as Elihu Smales. Also, I don't think I've ever met anyone with the first name Elihu. I don't know where that comes from.
Elihu Root. He was the Secretary of State for Theodore Roosevelt.
Only you, Dad. Michael O'Keefe as Danny Noonan, Bill Murray as Carl Spackler, Sarah Holcomb as Maggie O'Houlihan, Cindy Morgan as Lacey Underall, Scott Colomby as Tony D'Annunzio. Background for the movie: Caddyshack was released on July 25th, 1980. On a budget of roughly $5 million, the film would gross nearly $40 million in 1980 and $60 million during its entire run to make it the number 17 film of 1980. The film was unheralded by critics at the time, with a few notable exceptions, but due to its popularity among the general audience, grew on critics over time. The film is currently recognized by the American Film Institute on the following lists. In 2000, it was on AFI's 100 Years, 100 Laughs at number 71. In 2005, AFI's 100 Years, 100 Movie Quotes, Carl Spackler's Cinderella Story, Out of Nowhere, a former greenskeeper now about to become the Masters champion. It looks like a miracle. It's in the hole. It's in the hole. It's in the hole. Came in at number 92. For 2008's AFI's 10 Top 10, it was the number 7 sports film. There was a sequel called Caddyshack 2 in 1988.
No, there wasn't.
Which performed poorly at the box office and is considered one of the worst sequels of all time, with only Chevy Chase reprising his role. Many of the film's quotes are part of popular culture, with many fans able to recite the movie line for line, and merchandise is still licensed and sold by several companies as of 2024. Funko Pop produced several figures in 2019, as well as a set exclusive to Target. Tiger Woods has said he likes the film and played Carl Spackler in an American Express commercial based on the film. The University of Minnesota uses part of the film as a dance sport ritual for athletics, encouraging fans at collegiate sports games to do the gopher and imitate the dancing gopher, referenced because of the mascot Goldie Gopher. Those goofy Minnesotans.
Yeah.
In 2016, Brett Baer, in a Fox News interview, asked the Dalai Lama whether he had seen the movie. The Dalai Lama responded he had not seen the movie, and while he had played badminton, he had never played golf. And finally, a 2023 Super Bowl commercial for Michelob Beer also featured modern athletes recreating scenes from the film. Caddyshack currently holds a 73% among critics on Rotten Tomatoes, a 48 score on Metacritic, and a 3.4 out of 5 on Letterboxd. So, as we begin each week, Dad, remind us, what is your relationship to this film?
This is a movie that I was going on and on. I wanted to go and see because I was a huge Chevy Chase and Bill Murray fan, and I really wanted to go see it. And I talked to all my friends. And on Friday night, a group of my friends went and got in and saw it. And they were all younger than me at 16. I went Saturday night and got carded and told I couldn't go in. So I didn't see it for almost a year later when I saw it on HBO for the first time.
Shucks. The shenanigans and tomfoolery of high school. Oh, well. My relationship to this, I believe I was 10 when you first tried to show me this movie. I remember you fast forwarding through the first scene with Ty Webb, where there's some things that are going on that are probably not appropriate for a 10-year-old, and then forgetting that there was the second scene. And all of a sudden, like, where's the remote? Where's the remote? Because I probably should not have been watching Lacey Underall having nothing under all. Anyway, I do remember watching it occasionally, but it certainly is not, other than the lines being preserved in pop culture, is not as generally apparent to me. Like, it certainly is not a movie that I think has stuck with me in the same way that it has your generation. I would say the equivalent of this is probably something like Anchorman or Step Brothers, or maybe even The Hangover, that were much bigger to people that lived through the moment, but don't quite have the same level of nostalgia after the fact. And Joe, what is your interesting relationship with this movie?
I believe we had it on VHS when I was a kid. I do recall seeing it often, whether it was just in its push syndication on HBO or Cinemax or something, or what have you, of that era. But I definitely saw it too young, probably around 6 or 7. And at that age, it was, hey, there's nudity in this movie and there's a dancing gopher. What more could a 7-year-old boy ask for in a film? See?
Yeah.
Simpler times, for sure. I think since then, it's probably been, it was on TBS here and there, or, whatever extended cable channel, until this rewatch, to get myself prepped to come chat about it.
Now, if we can even attempt to try, because I'm not sure that the movie knows what it's about, but what do we think the movie's about?
Should I go first?
Sure. Go ahead, because I have my own thoughts.
Well, to look for a deeper meaning in the overall story, we will put this into the realm of, it's about classism, diluted down to a game of golf, but in the vein of a trading places sort of thing. All of the stakes ride on the guy who really, really needs this money or really, really needs this scholarship, while the rest, the rich, just are playing a game, but really it's his future and his livelihood that he's worried about. So Danny Noonan, coming from an enormous family and a poor family, definitely determined to get himself into school, in this era of, hey, everybody's got to go to college as soon as you graduate. So I suppose it's more things on top of that other than just the classism in golf. But to me, that was kind of what I brought it down to, at least to take a note seriously for a moment. And then from here on out, I think I can stick to silly after my take on it.
I'll be honest, I don't have anything deeper than that either. I think it's an entirely constructed middle finger to those that go to country clubs.
Okay. Depends on which version of this script you're talking about, because the original version of the script was supposed to be all about the caddies, and it was supposed to be about their struggles against the rich and elite. And what ended up happening is it had to go through so many rewrites, and then they had to add in, because they really liked having Chevy Chase in the movie, then they had to have scenes that had to have Rodney Dangerfield, then they had to add in Bill Murray. Then that wasn't good enough. You had to add a scene with Bill Murray and Chevy Chase. And what they got was a hodgepodge of stuff that was 4 hours long that they had to edit down to less than a 2-hour movie. And what's left is this. And it doesn't make a lot of sense when you stop and think about it. It just kind of seems like a hodgepodge. Why, for example, do we have an Irish girl in it? Because the original script, Brian Doyle Murray wrote about his brother Ed when he was caddying at their local country club. And they imported Irish girls to work in the concessions at the country club every year. That's why she's Irish.
And what an Irish name does she have? I bet it was Maggie on the first write, and they said make it more Irish, so it became Maggie Houlihan. And then they said make it more Irish, so they had to make it Maggie O'Houlihan.
Probably.
You could say, if you're focusing on the Michael O'Keefe, Danny Noonan portion of things, it's finding your own place in life and in this world. I mean, even through the hodgepodge, I do think they do come up with at least a through line that you could say is a connective tissued story, even though there are a ton of plot holes in this thing. Like, it's all over the frickin' place. But him trying to decide whether he wants to be part of the rich upper crust and basically kiss ass his entire life to try and be a part of something, or whether he wants to be a part of the general caddying crowd that doesn't take life too seriously, that is okay with working in a lumberyard, kind of fighting against the notion that you have to be Judge Smales to be important or fit in or to enjoy life. And clearly we see most of the characters who seem to be having more fun, that are rewarded for their efforts in this movie, are those that kind of clash with what we would normally think of as the people who play golf.
Who are the dopes in this film? The real dorks? The judge, the doctor, the land developer, and the rich millionaire playboy.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't the caddies? They're normal. It's the rich people that are the dopes.
I mean, Spaulding is a dork. Carl
That's true.
Spangler is a dork.
But the caddies are fairly normal. They're the heroes.
I think the other question that we often revisit when we have specific comedies on the show, and this is one of a very specific genre of comedy, the sports comedy, but I think it's been quite a number of years since we had like a true comedy per se that wasn't tied into some larger IP or something that had an attraction to it. Super Mario Brothers, Barbie coming out last year, both of those you could put in the comedy space, but they're both delivered in a different way and obviously tied to larger IP. We just don't get original comedies anymore, and we're definitely not getting sports comedies much anymore. Now, we're in a different environment, both socially and politically, but is there room, at least on the forefront, that you can see where some of this might come back in a cycle?
I don't know. They tried to reboot The White Men Can't Jump. Nobody was rushing out to see the new Jack Harlow movie, that's for sure. And while it was a fine movie, and it probably would have played maybe a little better had it not been a remake of the original, I don't see sports really pulling a lot of the strings to get people out to go see it. You know, maybe if they were going to try to get with the fad, they'll jump in and make a pickleball comedy. But I don't. That'd be the only relevant sport that might get some mass appeal or mass attention.
Mm.
But yeah, there's definitely, I don't know, especially on sports side, I don't see anything that will gain the mass appeal. And then even with golf, I don't know how you come back and try to top. You know, I mean, I think there's rumors of a Happy Gilmore 2.
Not only rumors, it's going to be released in like a couple of weeks, months.
Was it that soon? I haven't kept up with it then.
The trailers have dropped on that one already, and they have that entirely filmed. It's just a matter of, I can't remember exactly when it drops.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah. So I don't know. I don't see them, you know, reinventing the wheel with the sports movie, but I mean, I'll always take a good sports montage for filler. I'm a sucker for a good sports montage, regardless of the sport. I love it all.
I think we've aged out. The primary eras of comedy that I can see from like these kinds of movies, the frat movies, starting roughly with Animal House and then going through the maybe late 80s, early 90s, kind of dies out where that humor level just became somewhat untouchable, save for like American Pie kind of makes a slight resurgence, but that's kind of to itself. And then you had kind of the Adam Sandler, Will Ferrell, Judd Apatow crowd, who was much more of the self-deprecating humor. We're going to make fun of me. I'm going to be kind of the foil in all of this. I'm kind of the doofus that puts his life together by the end of the film. And I think we've also aged out of that too, where we feel it's a little bit mean-spirited culturally. So I'm not sure where the next iteration is. I think there is the possibility that maybe 3-4 years from now, that we find something that isn't Stranger Than Fiction in our current reality to be able to poke fun at. But it just seems like, especially with the dearth and availability of comedy specials, that comedy movies just is not something that people feel they need to go to a theater or even turn up on Netflix to see.
Yeah, I think this year, as far as comedies go, I was really surprised by the Keke Palmer and SZA One of Them Days. That movie had me rolling, and it really touches into the dire straits of, you know, folks that are trying to make rent and trying to make the bills and trying to make something of themselves. And it had a lot of relevance, but probably doesn't appeal to the mass audience, I would assume. And then there's also just your existential kind of finding yourself movies, like that one last year, My Old Ass, where Aubrey Plaza, I think, was in it for maybe all of 20 minutes, but it's her younger self talking to her older self. And, you know, there's some sparkles here and there, but yeah, I always like to find a good comedy just because they're hard to get like all the way through to the end. You can find one with some good pieces and some good bits throughout it, but then, you know, inevitably it ends up predictable and cliche by the end, like you said, well, you'll clean yourself up by the end and everything will be good and we'll high five, you know, and we'll be done.
The only thing I can think of right now, because there's so much backlash over so many different things and how much of a tightrope even, you know, every comedian needs to work, is the ones that seem to do well. Gaffigan, for example, it's usually stories about families. So what about a longer version or long form version of Married with Children? That type of variety where it's all about the family and the dynamics of a husband-wife relationship is a comedy.
Well, that's more probably in the sitcom range than it is necessarily as a movie concept.
Well, that's what you're going to have to do, is you're going to have to build a movie where the comedy is based around relationships and family, because it's about the only thing you're going to have most people finding humorous without it being offensive.
I guess I can't disagree with it, because even like romantic comedies has seen a definite decline. We're not really getting those kinds of movies right now either.
Yeah. You get a like 1 or 2 a year, maybe. Last year, or was the year before, that movie Rye Lane, with the guy who played Andy in the new Alien movie, and that movie was tremendous. But yeah, they're few and far between. I think we're even 2 years removed from that one for a good romantic comedy.
I also think there's just too much stuff being made. Be it from me to say that I want less content, but it's just harder to find things because people are putting so much in your face, whether that's Reels or TikTok or any of the other stuff that's being made. There's just so many avenues to binge or consume content. I think somebody made the comment, and I can't remember where I was listening to this, where podcasts have basically replaced what late night used to be. And I think to a degree that's probably true too. So that might be taking some of the space. This particular show is going to be on YouTube. You can watch the whole video version of this. So even from that standpoint, it could be replacing the normal long format interview space that you'd normally watch in other televised programs. So I don't know. I'm not adept at being able to see trend lines of where they're going. I'm usually good at aggregating multiple people's opinions who are much better at trying to predict some of that stuff. I'd love for comedies to come back. I think they're great, but even sitcoms right now are having kind of a decline as well, except for you have a couple of different spaces that will occasionally hit gold on something. And I think on Apple, they're at least trying to do a few different things, I think, to varying degrees of success. Like, I enjoy Loot. I enjoy Shrinking. I enjoy, obviously, Ted Lasso now that they're bringing it back. But those are a very specific slice of, they're very much very positive oriented shows.
Yeah, they're a feel-good palate cleanser for the day. Let me unplug. But then that gets into the, not everybody has Apple TV. Not everybody has, you don't have every streamer either. And that's unfortunately where the comedies are going to land, because they're not going to draw, ticket sales. They're not going to draw a group of high school kids going out on a Friday night and ditching their friend who has to go try to get his ticket on Saturday. That's just not going to happen with a lot of comedies today. So now it's going to be straight to Netflix, straight to Prime. And you might be like, oh, there's like, what was, it didn't get great reviews from what I saw, but there was a Will Ferrell and Reese Witherspoon movie about wedding venues or something. And it was just on Prime Video, but it's like, well, where is it? And, oh, I think I saw something about that, but I'd rather watch this other thing anyway. So it's tough going for comedies for sure. And then especially, you get all your different cast folks, and then people are like, well, I'm not going to watch it because they're in it, or this other person's in it, and I'm going to skip it for that reason. So I think it's tough for the comedy genre for sure.
There's two parts to this too. One, we're going through a social upheaval right now. So where comedy is going in the next 5 years, who knows? Second thing, you pointed out the sheer volume of stuff. When I was a kid, being the old guy here, you had 3 networks and you had what was at the theater. And so if you're standing around the cooler talking about something, you only had 3 shows from the night, 4 shows, maybe 5, that anybody talked about from the night before. And you had what's playing at the local theater. So you only had a limited number of films. So people keyed in on it. It was recommendations. You need to go and see this. We're so far removed from that, where there's so much content. I mean, you just can't keep up with everything. I'm constantly having to, I see a show, I think, oh, that might be good. And if I don't write it down, I never see or hear it again. It's not like somebody else that I know is telling me about it, or that it's a discussion that comes up at the office on a Tuesday morning or something like that. It just doesn't happen. So you lose stuff. And I think it's hard for things to get built or followings to start occurring, both for film and for the ticket sales associated with it, and for TV shows to build a following.
So are we ready to dig in a little further to this movie? Do you have our plot summary ready for us, Dad?
I do. Bushwood Country Club, an opulent haven for the wealthy, where life revolves around pristine greens, exclusivity, and egos so inflated they could double as golf carts. But underneath the facade of luxury lies a clash of worlds. Working-class caddies and eccentric groundskeepers versus snobby elitists. And it's about to get hilariously out of control. Danny Noonan, Michael O'Keefe, a young caddy striving to secure his future, finds himself entangled in the club's tangled hierarchy, navigating manipulative judges, raucous millionaires, and life lessons from Ty Webb. Chevy Chase, a laid-back golfer with pearls of wisdom that sound like they came from a Zen koan written by Groucho Marx. Meanwhile, Carl Spackler, Bill Murray, the quirky groundskeeper, engages in an escalating war with a gopher, so cunning it could win a philosophy debate. Add in Alice Cervek, Rodney Dangerfield, whose outlandish behavior becomes a catalyst for chaos, and Bushwood transforms into the backdrop for a wild satire of class division, absurd ambition, and the universal search for meaning. Through golf, naturally. The result? A comedy that skewers pretense and celebrates the unpredictability of life, all while leaving the audience wondering how a gopher became the most unstoppable force in the universe.
Thank you. Did you know? The movie was inspired by writer and co-star Brian Doyle Murray's memories working as a caddy at a golf club. His brother Bill Murray and Harold Ramis also worked as caddies when they were teenagers. Did you know? A big hill was built from scratch for the climactic 18th hole scene because the country club did not want its course blown up. The pyrotechnic people used too many explosives, which completely destroyed the hill and caused planes flying by to report the explosion as if a plane had crashed there. Did you know? According to the original script and specials on the making of the movie, the character Maggie is an exchange student from Ireland. This explains her thick accent, which goes unexplained in the final movie. Did you know? The reason the scenes of Mr. Gopher's underground world look better than the rest of the film is because they were filmed on a soundstage with better quality film stock and cameras rather than on location like the majority of the film. Did you know? After Cindy Morgan's dispute with John Peters over her nude scene, he invited a photographer to the film set for a photo spread that was to appear in Playboy as a promotion for the film. Morgan refused. Harold Ramis sided with her and canceled the shoot. Did you know? In the lovemaking scene, Cindy Morgan was so uncomfortable that Harold Ramis ordered a closed set for it. Michael O'Keefe asked all the cast and crew to take off their shirts for the scene to make her feel more comfortable. Those shirtless guys surrounding a nervous naked girl was only going to make it worse. And finally, did you know? To the end of his life, even though the film became better appreciated over time, Harold Ramis was dissatisfied with his directorial debut. All I see are compromises and things we could have done better, he told GQ in the late 2000s. His greatest complaint was that no one in the film other than Michael O'Keefe was able to swing his or her golf clubs properly. And with that, we will take our first break, and we will be right back. Before we jump back into the episode, next week for our 259th episode, we welcome back two different 10-time club members, Rob Conlon of Westport Studios and Kieran B. of the Best Picture cast, to discuss yet another Best Picture winner for its 25th anniversary, Gladiator from 2000, directed by Ridley Scott, written by David Franzioni, John Logan, and William Nicholson, cinematography by John Mathiasson, music by Hans Zimmer and Lisa Gerrard, starring Russell Crowe, Joaquin Phoenix, Connie Nielsen, Oliver Reed, Richard Harris, and Jaimin Hanshu. You won't want to miss that one, so watch ahead of the show by searching the Real Good app to find where it's streaming for you. That's REELGOOD. Also, before we get back into the heart of the show here, Joe, what is up with you and where can people find you?
Well, I am on Letterboxd. I believe my handle's just Bag of Donuts on there. I try to get everything that's available on there logged. And then I pair my reviews with a post that I create on Instagram on I'll get to it when I get to it. The theme being that of which a working dad can only get to movies when I can get to them. So Maybe once it's on streaming, maybe I watch it in the theater. I don't know. It's kind of a crapshoot. So eventually, but yeah, this year there's been some big ones. I didn't realize that it corresponded with the 30th anniversary, but I finally watched a Goofy movie. And just with Val Kilmer's passing, I finally watched Tombstone. Obviously, two very different movies, but one just recent ones that many people have seen and many people quote and reference. But that's the theme of I'll get to it when I get to it. I get to these things and experience them for the first time. So it's been really, really cool.
I saw Tombstone as well for the first time recently for an episode that we did for Shoot the Flick. If anyone is interested, you could go find that on any of your major podcast platforms. But you can find all of our thoughts there. Needless to say, I don't think it'll be coming up on the Greatest Movie of All Time podcast scheduling anytime soon.
Yeah. If you did a special Val Kilmer episode, maybe, but yeah, as far as the overall movie goes, I think I'd agree with your decision there.
If I was doing a Val Kilmer episode, there are some films in there that I probably wouldn't do, such as Batman Forever, which I think, as much as everybody deadpans Batman and Robin, I think Batman Forever is much worse, just personally. But that being said, we are doing Heat later this year, and we have already covered Top Gun. So other than maybe the Doors movie, I don't know if there are a lot of other major Val Kilmer films that I feel like we need to cover outside of those.
Yeah, you could do an offshoot to the weirdest movie of all time and do The Island of Dr. Moreau and all of the antics that happened in the background of that one. But that may be the only one of interest outside of those.
If we do irreverent 80s comedy month, maybe Top Secret, but that might be the only other one that I can think of. So, all right, now back into the regular show. This is normally where we would pick up with best performances, but if you have not been here before for any of our revisit episodes, this is not one where we cover any of the original categories. For that, you can go back to our April 7th of 2021 episode to find all of our original content where we discussed quotes, which obviously was going to be a very long section of that particular program for this movie. But we also covered best performances, most charismatic, and many other things, best scenes in that original episode. So you can find that there. This is one of those that at least it's after season 1, so I don't feel as self-conscious suggesting you go back to listen to our content from that long ago. But you're welcome to do whatever you'd like. But here today, we're here to discuss primarily the Stanley Rubric. So that's where we're going to start here. On the original episode, and we always start with legacy. So on the original episode, that was a 9.5. And just to remind the audience of what legacy is, this is a measure of the legacy of the film roughly 5 years after it came out. So 1985 to today, what is the legacy of the film? We split this category 5 and 5 points apiece between the industry and the general audience for a total of 10 points. Now, again, we had a 9.5 originally on this. If I remember right, and I did not go back and listen to the original episode, so this is just purely based on my memory from an episode recording 4 years ago. I was the one who really banged the drum to try and get this legacy score up. And I will say, even though I normally ask you whether you want to go first or second, Dad, I will just preempt that slightly by saying, I think we got this score wrong. But would you like to go first or second?
Well, I want to hear how we got it wrong. So go ahead.
It should be much lower. First off, the industry, while it has some passing interest in it, obviously the AFI has recognized it multiple times over. I think part of the reason that I was pushing to have it so high at the time was I kind of used ESPN commentators as part of the industry to make an argument that somehow the industry side of this was much higher. Now, understandably, the initial 5 years, I think, impact and significance aside, those initial reviews do not count to legacy. And by the time we got to 5 years, I think the movie had grown on people enough, probably in the circulation between VHS and home box office, etc., to being more of a cult classic staple. Past the point at which it was probably even cult status, but more of a general comedy of the 80s. But is it like one of the first 25 comedies people are going to name in the history of cinema? Like, it's up there, but you have to start delving into some very niche areas like sports comedies in order for this to really come up as like a central important comedy. I think Airplane from the same year is a much more significant comedy, not only to the 80s and this era, but just overall in the history of film. And so while Caddyshack has some important recognition from the standpoint that all four of these figures, although it was Ted Knight's last film, but Rodney Dangerfield goes on to do several other movies that at least were somewhat tangentially popular through the 80s. Bill Murray obviously has his career kind of explode after that point. And Chevy Chase goes on to have his own larger career based on when people could bother to work with him, or stand to work with him, I guess is more accurate. It has some level of appreciation in the industry, but I can't put it at nearly that level. And I still think it lives more with the audience than it does necessarily industry professionals, other than it maybe if you want to associate the sequel, which somebody said did not exist, with this movie and them trying to capitalize on something larger of this movie as maybe a franchise or something. So I gave it a 3 from the industry. I gave it a 4 for the audience because I do, again, think it has waned a bit over time. Again, this is 45 years old, and it's really hard for comedies to last that length of time and still be somewhat significant or culturally relevant. But this has somewhat lived about that point or straddled that line. So I'm going to go with a 7. I think that's much more appropriate than a 9.5.
No, I think we either got it right or got it too low.
Oh, wow. This is going to... Okay, so, Joe, to introduce you to this concept, over the last roughly 2 years, when we do these revisit episodes, normally I would average out these scores. And I forgot to mention to you, we negotiate a final score on these. So think of this as an opening offer. I'm at a 7. Dina's apparently at a 10. You could come in the middle of either one of those or come in lower. You can't obviously go higher than a 10. But we'll eventually have to settle where we're going to land on this one. And the fact that we have a rather wide distance between Dana and myself so far of 3 points is telling. So with that, the floor is yours.
All right. Rodney Dangerfield was just getting to the point where he was becoming popular, but not a household name when this movie came out. He became a household name. And you can go up to people yet today, and I think even people who are under 30, you'd get at least 50% of them who would have some idea who Rodney Dangerfield was.
Not a chance.
You don't think so?
Not a chance.
Okay.
People under 40 are going to have a hard time knowing who he is.
I turned 40 in 2 months, and I do know, but I'm on that cusp of the elder millennial crew that knows about him.
Okay. Well, but Chevy Chase would not have, he had one movie before this. It really launched his career. He did all the Fletch movies. He did the vacation movies, European Vacation, all the Christmas Vacation, all those. Direct result of his popularity cemented by this film. The fact that
Didn't
this
Vacation
film
come out before this?
No, it was later.
It was later.
It was
his
80.
first film was a film he did with Goldie Hawn. And I can't remember the name of it offhand.
Yeah, Vacation. Oh, Vacation was 89.
The original Vacation movie was 83, like you said.
Oh, I'm Christmas Vacation, my bad.
Christmas Vacation was 89, 85 was European, and Vegas was 97. But even like Spies Like Us and Fletch were 85. So yeah, okay. All right, this predates a lot of his work, but
okay,
sure.
Bill Murray.
When was Meatballs?
81 and...
Nope, 1979. So it slightly predates this one.
Bill Murray with Harold Ramis in Stripes was 81. 82?
I wanted to say it was like 83, but nope, you're right. It's 81.
Okay. So, and it launched him. It became the fact that this became a movie that has spawned the fact that so many of the lines are still quoted today. I'll guarantee you can't put on the Masters today without hearing some moron in the crowd yelling, "It's in the hole."
Yeah, it's some drunk guy in his 50s, but sure. I'll grant you that. But there's also a lot of dumb idiots who will say Baba Booey for some unknown reason.
The whole na. That's still, I hear that. I hear so many of these lines being used, even by people who probably have no idea where it came from in the film.
Okay.
So I'll give it a slight reduction down. I'm going to go 4 and 4. So I'm going to go with an 8.
Okay. So we have a 7 and we have an 8. All right, Joe, that's a little bit more manageable. Do you have an outlier, or are you going to find your way in between us?
I was also at a 7 on my combined. I think thinking about it as, a single digit age kid knowing what it was and recalling a lot of the movie and remembering it and its cult classicness. But I think it has that generational stop. So having a conversation at work about the movie, and Gen Xers and boomers are well aware of the movie, but I asked the guys I share a space with, and they're both, Gen Z, and they had no idea. They were like, yeah, I think I've seen or heard of that movie before, but they had never seen it. They didn't know anything about it. I do think that eventually the comedy space was going to get into golf movies anyway, so I don't think it necessarily paved a huge path for sports comedies per se, but I do think that it did help. Obviously, it helped kick off bigger careers for Chevy Chase and Bill Murray, and then Harold Ramis is probably one of my favorite directors of all time, kind of going across the board. And I don't know where I'd rank him, to be honest, but I do love all of that. But I think where it falls on the generational piece, it's just I think that brings it a little lower for me. So I'm a 7 combined. I don't know where you go from here with 2 7s and an 8, but but we're not far off. I guess I'm not making this too difficult.
I think you have valid arguments that Chevy Chase and Bill Murray becoming comedy staples of the 80s and still having name recognition, partly, if not sincerely, on the backing of this, although you might credit something to Saturday Night Live at that point, but it's really hard for me to say specifically what's more responsible in that particular case. But Ghostbusters is still a enormous movie. Groundhog Day and several other Bill Murray comedies of the late 80s and 90s are significant to people today, even if Caddyshack and Stripes have somewhat declined or fallen off. Chevy Chase is still remembered because Christmas Vacation has become a Christmas staple to people. And he was on Community, at least, until they couldn't tolerate him anymore. So among those things, I think I'm willing to maybe go up to your 4, but where I might have been a little high on the audience side of it, listening to Joe. So I think I'm willing to moderate my opinion, go up to a 4 on the industry, but reduce my 4 on the audience side to a 3.5 and settle at a 7.5.
Yeah, I think the only other thing that could bring it back around is that movie Saturday Night, where it goes through the whole first show of Saturday Night Live and then the stuff around the 50th anniversary and why wasn't Chevy Chase there. And I think there could be something there that could draw a little buzz, but this also, I figured for sure, like NBC would be clamoring to get this on Peacock so people could see these two guys in a film together and could drive some of that. But I was floored at its lack of availability trying to find it to rewatch it. So I don't know what's going on there unless they are planning a remake, but maybe they'll try to time it with the Masters next year. Who knows?
Are we good at a 7.5 or does somebody have?
Fine.
Okay.
I'm good at 7.5.
All right. So we've moved down 2 points on that one. All right. Then we move to impact and significance. And much like Legacy, this is a category split between the industry and the audience. But the initial 5 years after its release that we ignored for Legacy, we now add back in for impact and significance. We had a 6 on the original episode for this one. Dad, I will let you lead off.
I think, as we've already outlined the films, I think that the pairing up of Murray and Harold Ramis within that first 5 years is what ultimately led to Stripes and probably gave the green light, or at least the motion ahead, for Ghostbusters. I think that was seen as being a great pairing. So I'm going with a 4 for the industry for that. And within that first period of time, when it was available it was released, it did okay, not great. 14th, I think, for domestic box office that year. It got to HBO, it went nuts again, and everybody was talking about it when I was at that age. Everybody had seen it. If you either were a huge fan or you had been lukewarm on it, there was nobody who really dared say they did not like the film at that time. It was within the moment. So I'm going within that first 5 years at least at a 4.5. So I'm at an 8.5.
I think that it's really hard to say the narrow point of view where Bill Murray and Harold Ramis getting together makes for a significant pairing. Like, I don't want to be dismissive that Stripes was not a big movie. It kind of was. I mean, it's not Ghostbusters, but it's still big. But what I think you could make an argument for the larger concept of SNL making stars and how that impact led to comedy of the 80s. Because not only do you have Chevy Chase, you have Bill Murray, you have Dan Aykroyd eventually.
John Belushi.
Well, within a certain limited scope. But again, this movie having two significant people off of SNL doing a fairly significant comedy of the time leads to Eddie Murphy getting opportunities and et cetera, et cetera. So you think of a lot of the major comedy stars of the 80s for movies.
Except Harold Ramis did not come out of the Saturday Night Live.
I'm not saying that it's limited to Harold Ramis. If you make the argument that it's limited to Harold Ramis, that works against you. I'm saying the only way you get to a 4.5 in my mind is if you're saying that having Chevy Chase and Bill Murray together in this comedy establishes that you can have two major stars come out of SNL. And that opens the doors to other things for the 80s. Is that the responsibility of this movie? I'm not sure, because there are other pre-existing films that come before it, and I'm not sure how open I am to that particular argument. But the critical reviews at the time were not great. The film did okay. I guess I was more open to the fact that I thought we got this closer to right than wrong on the initial time through, closer to a 6 than I am your 8.5. I will go with a 7 to moderate that somewhat, because I'm not completely open to some of those arguments, but you can certainly raise them.
I was at a 7 overall as well. And I don't know. I mean, obviously there's a lot of cult classics that the critics got it wrong initially, but a $5-6 million budget and finishing 17th in the box office for the year, making almost 40 million. As far as a return on investment, that you would love that kind of money return on your piece, unless they gave a bunch of it to Chevy and Bill Murray because they, got a bunch of points on the back end or something like that. But I think it had its place. I think it had it built its classicness in those years, despite not being critically acclaimed, but it's got enough going for it. And even when I did bring it up, the gopher is the fan favorite in our household too. So let's not forget the gopher, giving him a little credit for driving some of that impact and significance as well. So I'm at a 7.
Also, I'll point out the boost to Kenny Loggins' career as a solo artist.
Yeah. He had a grip on the 80s and soundtracks like nobody else.
All right, I'm willing to moderate and go to an 8.
Well, what's that do? Dana, you're at an 8 also, or you were 8.5?
I'll go to 8.
Well, I was at 7, but I'm happy to play along and be a people pleaser today.
Okay.
So we've basically evened out on a net average because we dropped 2 points for the first category and we gained 2 points for the second category. Novelty. We have kind of updated this category in the last, 6 months or so, where we split this category between the originality of anything having to do with the movie and then the execution of the movie itself. So anything having to do with the quality of the movie also gets 5 points. So 5 points and 5 points for a total of 10 in this category. Our original novelty score at the time was a 9. I think we got this wrong.
Mm-hmm.
You had several major sports comedies up to this point preceding this. The Longest Yard, Bad News Bears, Slapshot, that this is somewhat borrowing from. Now, I think that this narrative, oddly enough, is a little bit more appealing to me than like Slapshot, where I still can't quite tell what the central theme or idea of that movie exactly is. And it's more appealing to me than the original Longest Yard or Bad News Bears, where I saw the remakes before I saw the originals. And so those, I'm a little bit more open to the newer versions where they updated the jokes and such comparative to the older ones. But still, those were like significant cultural movies in the late 70s. And this is somewhat borrowing off of that. It's also not the first counterculture movie. Obviously, we discussed MASH a couple of months ago. I think there were quite a few counterculture comedies of the 70s that you could definitely point to that this is somewhat making a separation or is somewhat connected with. What I will say and give this movie credit for is the fact that I think this is the most significant movie to use the version of we're going to have a very bare bones script and ad lib and let the stars kind of create the jokes in the moment of what's going on. And while that template didn't foster into something larger until probably much later, it is now one of the more dominant, or at least was the most recent dominant form of comedic movie, where the Apatow crew would write in general concepts of the script, but then they'd allow for ad libs all over the place. Farrell was very into that, where they would just do joke after joke after joke, and they had enormous amounts of film that they taped for each one of those films. So with that being said, I will give it a 3 on originality. Execution, I'm going to also give it a 3 because I feel that the humor is a little bit dated. And the direction, the style of play, the production design, it definitely feels its budget to me. And so I have it at a 6. All right, Dad, come in and lambast me.
The originality of this is not as a sports movie. The originality is that this is the first time that what was the essence of the writer's room of Saturday Night Live putting together a full-length feature. It took the comedy of Saturday Night Live and really put it together and put it on the screen. And that's where the heart of this is for originality. So I'm on originality, and as you mentioned, the ad-libbing wasn't a big part. So I'm at a 4 for originality. But execution, having watched this with a keener eye and having understood what took place, this film is the equivalent of dogs playing poker. It is so bad that it is actually great, because when you stop and think about how badly it's put together and how disjointed the film is, it came out brilliantly because that's the way it looks like it was supposed to be. And it becomes funnier as a result of it, because it doesn't make any sense. You got people coming in, you got the family there, you see mom and dad during the caddy tournament. That's the only other time you see the family. Yet they're like central for the first 5 minutes of the film. And it's all over the place. So execution, I'm at a 2.5 because it's bad.
So you're at like a 6.5?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Joe, where are you coming down?
I was pretty low on my execution. I realized I'd given myself in my notes out of 10, but yeah, I was down in that 2. I guess it would have been a 2.25, we'll call it, but I could be generous and give it a 2.5. The part that stuck out to me the most was when Dangerfield would play music, and whatever they were playing on set was nowhere near to the same tempo or vibe of what they put over top of the actual movie. So he's like asked the band to play something, and then they just cut straight to a full-on Earth, Wind, and Fire song. Just real weird cuts like that. His dancing was atrocious, but that's not necessarily has to do with execution. But I'm at a 6 overall. I did like the originality of. I always like when they mash, different styles of movie together. So you have the puppetry of the gopher and this cat and mouse between Bill Murray and the gopher, but then you also have a comedy, and but it is like, it's 5 different types of comedic movies all at the same time. And I think it's fun, but then I don't know where to pull out my nostalgia for the movie and my love of remembering getting to see it and laughing about it and all that. So I'm at a 6 overall, but I think, they were, as far as originality on the subject, like I said, they were going to get around to golf movies anyway. It was going to happen. It was just going to be a matter of time before that topic made its way across the plate. But that's my overall. But yeah, the execution was pretty rough, and then the editing, but it makes more sense if it was so much more that they had to try to cram into the 100-minute quota, I'm sure, that they were given.
Well, not to mention that everybody was high on cocaine.
Yeah.
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 All right, there are 2 of us at a 6 this time. Basically, Joe and I have been in lockstep this entire time and come along with you, Dad. I think this is one where I'm not buying your argument on the half step up for originality, so I'm going to stick at my 6.
Fine.
So novelty then becomes a 6, so we move 3 points down on that category from the original score. So that looks like a good spot for our second break. We'll be right back. Before we jump back into the episode, and before we get to the Stanley rubric in a minute, if you're ever curious about our master greatest movies of all time list that has every graded movie we've ever discussed on the show, there's a link in the episode description of every episode of this show, or you can go to RonnieDuncanStudios.com and find it as the top entry on the Greatest Movie of All Time podcast show page. That has the grades we've done so far for all 234 movies we've graded, and we continue to add more each week. Make sure to check that out as we go and follow along. All right, we left off at classicness. Classicness is a very difficult category to specifically define. I believe since the last time that you've been on, Joe, and frankly, since I think only the beginning of the season, have adjusted this from our baseline of 7 moving down a point to the baseline of 6 now for whether something has basically aged well or not. And this can have, especially in a comedy, anything to do with the movie, but comedies can age rather poorly, rather quickly. The humor gets dated. There are some other things that, especially in comedies of the 80s, that don't particularly age well. And so this is usually a very difficult, comprehensive, and nuanced category to try and discuss. I think this one makes it a little bit more tricky than some other ones. We're going to obviously have some very difficult times once we get to Revenge of the Nerds in 2029. But originally we scored this one as a 5, and I usually let my dad lead off this category, so go ahead.
All right. Let me start out by saying we're starting at the 6. I actually thought the comedy held up pretty well. There's a lot of comedy or a lot of, should get a bowl of soup with a hat. You know, the whole Dalai Lama, all that holds up. It's still fine. The one thing I will say, too, for a movie of this age, there are very few derogatory slurs. There's no homophobic slurs. There's no R slurs that are used, you know, when you're derogatorily referring to somebody else. That's now supposedly, according to Joe Rogan, coming back into vogue that you can use that. And I'm like, I don't think you can call people that, because there's enough people with intellectual handicaps that that's not appropriate, nor will it ever be again. Okay. Where it loses points, and I'd have to say 2, is the gratuitous nudity that was clearly unrelated to the film. It was solely for the purpose of titillating and getting young men into the box office or into the seats of the theater. So I'm going to go from the 6. I'm going to go up 2 points for an 8 and come back down to a 6.
Okay. I think I considered many of the same points that you made. For the situation with Cindy Morgan, I took off a point. For all of the plot holes in this thing, I took off another point, because it defies logic how the ending of this film goes, which we'll get to. I don't think the comedy held up nearly as well as you do, but I don't have that level of nostalgia for it that I think you did. I'm obviously going to be the much bigger defender of comedies that I have a certain level of nostalgia for. When we ever get to Forgetting Sarah Marshall, like I'm going to have a lot of difficulty scoring out on that one. But I don't know. I'm a -3 on all of those things right there. I will give it back a point for being ahead of its time on the ad lib portion of things, and kind of, I don't know, it's not creating it, but at least allowing that to be a heavy portion of how a comedy was made so that it had a template moving forward. So I'm at a 4.
I was at a 5 overall. I think the comedy of it's kind of a painful comedic note of a rich real estate mogul really screwing it up for everybody else. That hits a little too close to home, that maybe it hurts a little when I watch it in that light. But I think there were still a lot of jokes that I cracked up about. I did let my kid watch the pool scene where, you know, they come around to find out that it was just a candy bar, and she thought it was stupid and funny. So that was entertaining. And then even I don't know why this bit stuck out at me when they were like, the caddies can come to the pool, but only between 1 and 1:15 p.m. So they can only come for this 15-minute portion to hang out at the pool. And I don't know why that just... And then they, of course, wreck everything in just 15 minutes. So there's a lot of that really played, that like I probably noticed a lot more watching it around this lens. But then, yeah, I think in my brain, you know, me getting to see this as a single-digit age kid, now watching it almost 40 is very different. It was underwhelming in its gratuity, I thought, based on my memory, because I thought it was like this, you know, the raunch of all raunch you could ever imagine. But it's still completely unsupporting to the plot. It drives the story nowhere. When Ted Knight is introducing his niece to everybody, he is really grabbing onto her in an uncomfortable way as the creepy uncle. But I think by and large, a lot of the comedy can maintain, even if it's not everybody's style of comedy. And where I thought they were going, they made a comment early on about African Americans, but then the guy who later starts making money on the bets, and he's staging all of that, gets immediate karma. So I think it was, a lot of it was well done, but I'm still at a 5 overall. I mean, I wouldn't endorse this and say, oh, go watch it, it's so funny, for fear of being looked at in an odd fashion, I suppose. I had fun with it. I thought a lot of the bits were still good, but yeah, just I'm at a 5. So I guess I'm smack dab in between where you guys are.
I mean, 5 was the original starting point on this, because that's what we had in the first episode. I guess I'm okay with that.
Okay.
Making easy negotiations here.
Now, didn't we agree to average rewatchability since it's a subjective category?
Yes, it is a very difficult category to do. Again, this is the most subjective category that we have. Originally on this one, I'll give that much. We had an 8, but I will let our guest lead off this category.
Now, do you guys have a baseline, like a mid line on this where you say, this is what I'm thinking?
It is completely up to you. I think we have had 17 or 18 different tests for various things. We have the old Kieran B test. If you found this on cable, which doesn't really exist anymore, although Pluto and Tubi and whatever else have channels and things that you can now tune in on. But if you saw this on somewhere, would you stop? And then how long would you watch it is kind of one thing. We've had the people when you get to a hotel and you're flipping through channels and you find something on like this, which is very similar. We have the Peterson W. Hill, which is the weirdest one yet, where if you're coming out of the shower in your hotel room, do you bother to put on a towel if you see this is on TV? We have Dana's pickle test, which I still don't completely understand. But so it is completely up to your making of what you want this category to be.
Well, rewatchability, I don't know. I'm kind of balancing between my younger self for the nostalgia. Because if this was on edited for TV or not, I would have at least stayed and lingered for a while, or at least until the next commercial break or the next milestone scene of I just want to see the gopher real quick until once I get to see the gopher again, then I'll switch back to my other channel or whatever. Right now, even though I love Harold Ramis, I do not see myself rewatching this for a while. I don't know. I don't see a lot of reasons to really come back to it. But as somebody who's trying to watch so many different titles every year, I think it's just the place that I'm in. So I may be a little favorable here, but I'm at a 6 on rewatchability. And that's a little bit of nostalgia, but that's also with my current situation. But I know that 500 titles a year, I don't have any room to watch Caddyshack again if I'm going to make those numbers. So I've got a few that I rewatch every year, and those are some holiday classics or some corresponding, just great movies that I can't put down. But Caddyshack is not getting in the mix with Thelma and Louise or Malcolm X or Christmas Vacation for me. So that's where I'm at.
I'll make this short and sweet then. I've been trying to be more objective with this category and remove some of the personal attachment to things, but it's short. It's definitely nostalgic to some. It's not heavy. It's quotable. It is a bit dated in a lot of the references and such, the cultural aspect, the sensibilities of the time, and may not be translatable to new audiences. So I was at a 6 as well. All right, Dad, bring her home.
I'm at 8.5. And the only reason it's coming down from a 10 is because, quite frankly, I don't need to rewatch it. I could recite most of the movie by heart, and I could follow along and tell you the whole progression of the film almost by heart because I've seen it so many times. But it is something. I watched it twice yesterday. I watched it in the morning by myself, and then you hadn't watched it, so I sat and watched it again with you last night, and I had no problem sitting through it twice in one day. But am I going to go out of my way to put it on again? Maybe if I'm having a really, really shitty day and I just want to, have a laugh and not have to worry about anything, I'll put it on again. But it may be a couple of years before I put it on again. But I will watch it again. And if it's on, I'm flipping around, I'll probably sit and watch it for a while. So I went with an 8.5.
Okay. So that makes it a 6.83 average between the three of us. Then we move to audience score. Originally, in the first episode, we had an 88% for Google users and an 87% for Rotten Tomato users. Now, while the Rotten Tomato users stayed the same, the Google users dropped 4 points and moved to an 84%. So that creates us a move from 8.75 to 8.55 for a slight reduction there. Now, to repeat the categories, originally we had a 9.5 for legacy. We moved to a 7.5. Impact and significance, we moved from a 6 to an 8. For novelty, we moved from a 9 to a 6. For classicness, we stayed the same at a 5. And for rewatchability, we moved from an 8 to a 6.83. And audience score, we moved from an 8.75 to an 8.55. Originally, the score for this one was a 46.25, currently placing it on the list at number 118. And after this episode, we have a new final total of 42.33. And moving it down the list between Rain Man and Big. Do you want to take a guess at how many spots it slid?
22.
30.
64. It is now going to be 182. You know what? Now that it will be 181 because it moves backward. It's technically leapfrogging, and all the other movies move back above it. So, but either way, it moves 63 spots down. As always, if you have any comments on our scoring or anything else about the show, you can write us at greatestalltimemoviepodcast@gmail.com. You can find us on any of our socials at GMOAT Podcast, GMOAT, on Instagram, Twitter, Letterboxd, Blue Sky, YouTube, and TikTok. With that, let's move to remaining questions. We know why Maggie is Irish. It's kind of weird. Is Ty Webb Mitch Cumstein?
Maybe.
That seems like an odd name to make up or to not have made up. Why is Judge Smales so easy to maneuver into making larger and larger bets?
Because he's a judge. He thinks he's infallible.
He's saved all his money by only tipping a quarter, even when caddies lay their job on the line for him. Why is not? And I guess I get it, but Michael O'Keefe should have been the top billed. And I know if you're going to go get Chevy and you're going to get Bill Murray and you're going to get Rodney Dangerfield, they're going to probably ask and negotiate those parts. But I think Michael O'Keefe's the real first build in this situation.
If there's a lead actor nomination from this, not saying that there ever would be, nor should there be, but yes, Michael O'Keefe is clearly the primary lead actor in the movie. However, he's not the one that's going to be selling anything on the marketing. Nobody knew who the fuck he was. Nobody still knows who the fuck he was. They know the name Danny Noonan more than they're going to know Michael O'Keefe.
Yes. I had to check my notes for his real name, so of course.
Exactly. Anytime he pops up in some weird character actor thing on like a TV show somewhere, you're like, oh, it's Noonan. But other than that, like...
This was his second film. His first film was he was the son of Robert Duvall and the Great Santini.
Cool. But that's not selling movies. It's just not. You got to 17th on the box office because you had 4 comedy people, or at least decent actors, attached to the movie.
Well, Ted Knight was well known from the Mary Tyler Moore Show. And obviously, Rodney was popular. And I don't know if he started doing the light beer commercials before or after this movie.
I don't know either. I didn't really live through that time.
I know. I'm aware.
Okay. My biggest issue with this, the scoring system does not make any frickin' sense that one putt at the end of the movie somehow is make or break. First off, the doctor makes his putt. Or no, excuse me, he misses his putt. Then the judge makes his putt. Then Chevy or Ty misses his putt. So at best, if the entire match was halved, what he's doing is that he is tying the game on making the putt. The problem, of course, being that you can't revisit the 18th hole, which has now been exploded after the fact of the movie. But at worst, he can lose the match, but he can't win the match. So everybody celebrating at the end of the film makes no fucking sense.
Well, because they're all going to get laid. That's why they're celebrating. Yeah. It doesn't have to make sense if we're all going to get laid. That's the moral of the story.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
Yeah, well, at that time, that would have made perfect sense.
So any other remaining questions?
I think that does it for me on questions.
Okay.
Nope, I'm good.
So I do want to thank our guest for being back with us again for his second appearance. I don't think that you are signed up currently to do anything else with us for this calendar year, but certainly we do have some stuff for next year that we're going to be starting to schedule here in the near future. But before you take off, again, remind everybody what you're working on and where they can find you.
Well, you can find me on I'll Get To It When I Get To It on Instagram, Bag of Donuts on Letterboxd. I've got the link on Instagram too, so just go there. That's where I've got it. I try to do a few more collabs here and there. Just life's been busy and it is what it is. I guess if you're in the DFW market and you need a realtor, you can hit me up as well. If you need vintage clothing and you're in the States, my wife has a online vintage store called Retro Betty Vintage you can check out as well. I've got her inventory kind of around me here, so I might as well plug it since it's been in the view of the camera this whole time also. But that's it. That's what I've got going on. I don't know. We've been working through the Jurassic Park movies, so that's been fun to share with the kid. Maybe not as much fun as you get to 2 and 3, but the first one, the original, it's so good, so perfect. Such a fun time to share with the kiddo.
Excellent. And as always, our guest links are available both in the show notes of this episode and on our website. Dad, any remaining thoughts for the week?
Nope, I do not have any remaining thoughts.
I am slowly working my way through 1982 for our eventual appearance on the Revisionist Almanac. I did get through First Blood, if I haven't mentioned that on the show to this point. I did get through another watching of The Verdict. I got through 48 Hours. And I also got through what, at least to this point, has been the weirdest film of 1982, The World According to Garp. I was not expecting anything of that movie. It does not follow a clear, coherent narrative. It's apparently based on a book. I have no interest in reading the book after seeing the movie. It's a well-acted movie. It's just the story makes no friggin' sense.
The movie, from what I understand, follows the book very closely.
I would believe it.
He was a very popular author. I tried to read one of his books one time.
This being John Irving.
Yes. Got about 2 chapters in and said, no thanks.
So some other things definitely upcoming yet for me. And I think I just started Missing, which is extremely ominous. First off, Sissy Spacek and Jack Lemmon, I thought, all right, this will be a decent movie. But then it starts with the ominous, overtones, that really heavy 80s music. Boom, boom. That sounds like it's from Unsolved Mysteries. And it's giving me a certain level of angst and PTSD just from the association. These events were real. Okay, great. Let's just place it in this modus operandi where everything's going to go wrong immediately. Great. I'm glad. I really want to watch the remaining 2 hours of your film. Anyway, that's going to do it for us this week. Thank you for listening. Are you not entertained? Next week for our 259th episode, we welcome back 2 10-time club members, Rob Conlon of Westport Studios and Kieran B. of the Best Picture Cast, to discuss another Best Picture winner for its 25th anniversary, Gladiator from 2000. Directed by Ridley Scott, written by David Franzioni, John Logan and William Nicholson, cinematography by John Mathiasson, music by Hans Zimmer and Lisa Gerrard, starring Russell Crowe, Joaquin Phoenix, Connie Nielsen, Oliver Reed, Richard Harris, and Jaimin Han Chu. You won't want to miss that one, so watch ahead of the show by searching the Real Good app to find where it's streaming for you. That's REELGOOD. Please like, follow, rate, and review, or whatever on whichever platform you have so that more can join in our fun. You can also email the show at RonnieDuncanStudios.com or at GreatestAllTimeMoviePodcast@gmail.com, or find us on YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, Letterboxd, or TikTok at the handle @GModePodcast. The Greatest Movie of All Time is a production of Ronnie Duncan Studios. Our show is mixed, edited, and written by Thomas Duncan. Our music is thanks to Purple Planet Music. Our distributor is Captivate FM. Our technical provider is Riverside FM.